I hope you love principles in your life. I'm not talking P-A-L-S. I'm talking P-L-E-S, principles in your life. For example, if I were to say to you, 4 times 4 is 16, would all of you agree? See, that there's ready agreement there, isn't there? You're all shaking, you're all nodding, yes, that's okay. Why were you so quick to that? 4 times 4 is 16. I'll tell you why you were so quick. Because you had a 3rd grade teacher who said to you, if you memorize these principles, these little math facts, it will be a blessing to you throughout your whole life. And so we studied and we memorized. And I could stand up here and try to convince you that 4 times 4 is 14, and I wouldn't do a very good job. You'd immediately know it was wrong. See, because you haven't memorized. If I were to say to you 8 times 8 is 64, see, there's agreement. 12 times 12 is 144. See, we all agree to that. How about 13 times 13 is 169? Okay, fewer nods, that's true. So you memorize your 13s. How about 18 times 18 is 324? Uh-oh, we don't have very many nods. Didn't you memorize your 18s? Folks, let me ask you this. We've kind of built a rapport here, and you know I will never lie to you. If I tell you it's true, will you believe me? Thank you. It is. 18 times 18, 324. How about something like 39 times 39, 2581? Will you agree with that? Oh, so I see somebody figuring it out over there. If I tell you it's true, would you believe me? Thank you. You will? Ooh. I appreciate the confidence, but guess what? That's over 1,000 off. Now, you wouldn't have known that unless you'd have memorized your 39s, which I didn't either when I was in school. But see, this is the point, folks. Unless you know principles, we call these the multiplication tables, which are principles of mathematics. Unless you know principles and you've memorized them, somebody can come along and smile at you and say, I'll never lie to you, and present a great image and come up with the wrong answer, and you just might buy it unless you know the correct answer. Think that could happen? I'll tell you. That's happening in legislative halls all over this land, where somebody comes, sounds good, is a great person, very personable, maybe even teaches Sunday school or whatever, and must be a great guy, comes up with an answer, and it sounds so compassionate, so merciful, so helpful to other people. And so he presents it, and everybody says, yes, let's do it. And all of a sudden it proves disastrous. It's the wrong answer. But who knew it? Nobody. Because they didn't know any principles. See my point? Some of us have memorized principles for, say, religious beliefs. Somebody asked you what you believe. You could just go right down. This is what I believe. How would you like a set of principles for government? So that when somebody comes along and presents a grandiose program, whether it's a candidate running for public office, or whether it's a member of the state legislature or a member of Congress, presents some grandiose program, you could almost immediately say, that's the wrong answer, because you've memorized some principles. Would you like that? Just happen to have these here, and if we could have these passed out on these little cards, which on the front says, what is the 5,000-year leap? We've already told you what that is. It's the set of principles that the founders laid down and institutionalized in the Constitution, which, when people embrace them, will take them farther in 200 years than mankind had gone in over 5,000 years before. And the set of principles are on the back of this card. And there's 1 through 28. There's 28 of them. Now, the founders didn't sit down and say, okay, principle 1, let's write it down, principle 2, principle 3. No. As I told you earlier in this session, Dr. Skousen and his staff literally went through hundreds of writings of the founders and tried to distill their thinking into a set of principles, and that's what we have here. And I'm so grateful that he did that, as I said, so that I don't have to do it. It's all done. So what are we trying to do? I'm going around this nation trying to get people to memorize these principles. Get them in your head, so that if somebody proposes some grandiose program, you can immediately say, oh, that's good, because that supports a good principle of freedom. Or you might have to say, now that's very dangerous. You know, you memorize these principles. Let me just tell you here. And you're out working in your garden. This is during a campaign, some election's coming up. And your neighbor comes up to you and you said, hey, what do you think about this program that old so-and-so is proposing? You know, the one running for Congress. You'll put down your hoe and you lean up against the fence and you'll say, well, let me tell you about that program. And you might quote him a principle. Let me tell you the principle behind that. You might quote him, maybe principle 7 on your card, which says the proper role of government is to protect equal rights, not provide equal things. And you'll explain that a little bit, and then you might have to say, that's why that program he's proposing is very dangerous, because it violates one of the most basic concepts of good government. Or you could say, that's why that's a great program, because it supports one of the great principles of freedom and liberty that the founders set down. You know what he'll say to you? He'll look at you and he'll say, wow, where did you learn that? And you'll say, well, it's just a few things I memorized one time. So you got to be real humble when you know this much. It isn't that much to know, but folks, it's a whole lot more than most people know. And all of a sudden you become a teacher. And all of a sudden people start calling you before an election and they'll say something like, you know, I've been real busy and I haven't had time to study the issues of the candidates, but I know that you have. What do you think about some of these candidates or some of these issues? And I don't mind when people call and want to know, but see, all of a sudden you become a teacher when you know these principles. So we've put these principles on a little card, and you can keep them in your coat or in your purse, and when you're out somewhere and driving along a freeway with your friend, and you can pull out the card and say, what's number 8? Or what's number 2? So you can be conversant with these. Anyway, may I suggest to you, these are great principles. And if you're in my class, my government class, which I teach to 12th graders in high school, you couldn't get an A unless you memorized these 28 principles, stood up in front of the class and recited them to the class. Americans need to know these principles.